Hello, this is Nellie Lester. I'm speaking to you from WS & Co. And in today's podcast, we're going to be having a conversation around the context within which we practice at WS & Co. And give you some also history on how we got to be WS & Co. and what I have done in the past that led us to establish this company.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for being on the podcast. Thank you very much for that, I have to say. And so basically now, Nelly, can you just tell us a bit about your background and how you began your career as an urban planner in Canada? How did those early experiences influence your journey into leadership?
Oh, my word. My journey started quite a while back and not so much in Canada as opposed to Africa. So
Is
as
it?
a little girl, I grew up on a coastal city and I used to watch the seas, the ships sail away. And I always wondered, these ships do disappear and where do they disappear to? And it seemed to me that there was a world beyond what I was seeing on the shores of the Indian Ocean. And I was always curious to see what happens on the other side. And I think that's where my curiosity with the world and curiosity about cities may have begun, having grown up in a coastal town. So when I finished high school, I was one of those students who, in a way, felt like almost in a hurry. I seem to have always been in a hurry to get somewhere. And I thought, gee, university will be the way to get somewhere. Except I got to university and lo and behold, the equivalent of fees must fall happened. So we were being sent home. First, we got sent to the army, and then we were sent home because of the disruptions on campus. And based on that context, I started thinking, I don't want to take 6 years to finish a degree that I could finish in 3 years. And there began my search for looking for universities abroad. And for some reason, my father didn't want the States. And he said, well, you can apply anywhere, but not the States, because he felt that the people go to the States don't come back. So that's how I applied to start over my degree in Canada. I went to the east coast of Canada, a little town called Halifax, and that's where I did my undergraduate degree. And my master's degree that led to planning was really out of, again, that sense of wanting to make a difference, wanting to have an impact. And I looked at the environments that I witnessed in Canada compared to that which I left at home. And my thinking was always, why don't we have towns like this? I mean, this is a small town, but it looks like it's well managed, it's being coordinated. And I would like to make a difference when I return back to Africa, to be able to plan towns that look like this and create environments where humans can thrive. And that's why I took on the master's degree in urban and rural planning. I did master in urban and rural planning largely because yes, urban, but I was also thinking of the small towns. So the degree seemed to have combined all of that city element versus the rural element for me. And that began my curiosity and my search for more. Back then, I imagined that, I could come back to Africa and, work in a town or a city, and that would be fine. But then I was also thinking, but perhaps it would be better if you make the difference at a bigger scale. So my wildest
Okay.
dreams was like, which organizations work at a global scale? And it looked like, oh, it's the UN, it's this and that, the other. But needless to say, that's how my journey started. I then, after finishing graduating, I worked a bit at the city of Halifax. And then got called back at the university by the dean of the school, saying that they have just received about 7 or so students from Botswana who've come to Canada to study for architecture and planning. Now, the
Okay.
program was a co-op program, and you couldn't graduate unless you got internship or you had work experience. And so it quickly seemed to us that these students would need to come back to Botswana in order to be able to do their co-op. It would be unlikely that all of them will get placements for their co-op in Canada. And even if they did, the environment would have been quite different from that which they would have been expected to practice.
Okay.
So being a research assistant, a project officer, I'm sent with the students, to come to Botswana for their summer time, to be able to get attachment to some of the professional firms in Botswana, in Gaborone in particular. who were doing architecture. So my dean and I came to Gaborone with these students, only to find they weren't, this was, early 90s. There weren't that many practice organizations or companies in Gaborone. There was some Swedish firm, and the majority of them were actually South African firms that had located their offices in Gaborone. And it seemed like there was very little built environment that the students could dig their teeth into. And it was the search for the built environment in the South that led us to organize a tour with them to tour the Southern African cities, so we brought them to Johannesburg, Cape Town, Pietermaritzburg, just for them to be able to see how the built environment looks like, how the cities of the South look, what are the climatic conditions, what are the population sizes, just to help them give that context to what they were doing. So we go back to Gaborone, and the next thing I know, a colleague who was also there from Canada says, University of Cape Town is looking for a lecturer. Are you interested in the School of Architecture and Planning? I said, we've just been to the city, but it looks like a beautiful city. I wouldn't mind, having a trip down again, even if they don't, appoint me. So off I submit my CV, and the next thing I know, they say, how long are you in Gaborone? He said, we're there for just another couple of weeks or so. They say, well, we'd like to interview you before you go back to Canada. They flew me down to Cape Town, had the interview. I get back to my hotel in the evening, and they called to say, would like to offer you the job.
Okay.
And this is me returning back to Canada and wondering, should I not? Should I not? But when I spoke to it with the dean of the school at the moment, my trajectory was always to say, if I ever do anything, it has to be in Africa. And it seemed to me that what a wonderful opportunity to come and actually live in Africa, African cities, and get a sense of what that African city is before even writing about it, So the decision was made, I agreed to come down and relocated to Cape Town in 1995. So that was my beginning of being based in Southern Africa in many ways.
Okay.
Except being at UCT and all the academic environment, there we were talking about Italian piazzas. And I'm like, this is not what I came for in Africa. I wanted to know the real Africa, right?
Yeah.
So I was, looking at, the Cape Flats, Kailicha, Mitchell's Plain, and I said, those are the Africans that I really want to build for, right? Not the Italian piazzas and everything that we were being confronted with, which was theory and academic in a way. But I was searching for something that much more contextual. So I left the University of Cape Town before my 3-year contract, just because my feet were itching to get my hands dirty. And City of Cape Town was looking for a planner, and I went and joined the City of Cape Town,
Okay.
and so we started planning, around Lansdowne, Philippi Corridor, Mitchell's Plain. I was also a part of a Development Action Group, which is a nonprofit organization that works with communities in Cape Town. You may have heard about them, building houses. So those were kind of the networks, that I got into. Yeah, so you asked, how did I get into town planning? That's how I got into town planning.
Yeah. And so basically, though that specific, or let me say that experience, how did it actually influence you into your journey into the leadership space?
So in the leadership space, so my journey didn't stop in Cape Town. So I moved to Johannesburg, right? Moved to Johannesburg. By this time I'm married. I've got 2 kids. And in Johannesburg, I joined an urban NGO called PlanAct. Now, PlanAct, for those who would have been there in the early 90s, would know about their civic organization work. Again, working with communities, largely in townships, and back then there would have been Black councils, to try and help them get basic services and then all the rest of it. And it seemed to me that, yes, we were trying to work with communities, teaching leaders, new councillors, how to engage in council meetings, how to read policy documents, how to read legislation, almost like making them user-friendly. So we would take legislation and try and do small booklets, like that could be accessible, to any new
Okay.
councillor office, in order to help them make the decisions, because these are the decision makers, right? These are the leaders, that negotiate the budgets that the cities or the towns have to spend. They also need to respond to the needs of the community. And I thought, this is good, but gosh, the work that we do is a drop in the ocean. What if, we could actually influence at the national policy level, right? So this is me now trying to find a way of getting to the policy level. Who are the policy makers, and how can we change these policies at the top so that once it's a national policy, then everybody can subscribe to it? And this led me to join the national department. Back then, it was called the National Department of Provincial and Local Government. And they dealt with all the municipal laws, for cities and towns in South Africa.
Okay.
And my role there was really to look at piloting an urban renewal program and a rural integration program. So remember, I said I studied urban and rural development, and I always
Yeah.
interested in cities and small towns. So I thought, wow, this could be the platform to actually make the difference, because now we'll pilot. It was a presidential project, actually, that
Okay.
pilot was under President Becky, that piloted the urban renewal program and the integrated sustainable rural development programs. So we had, sites, 7 urban sites, and then about 13 rural sites that were selected as pilot sites.
Okay.
And that was really intended to help integrate all the government departments, towards supporting those pilot areas. It's easy to say, let's collaborate, let's do it. But when it comes to actually coordinating budgets, everybody has got their own targets. And so I started seeing the challenges of leadership then, in a way.
Okay. And I have to say, you've had quite the journey, You've had quite the journey, and it's really amazing to hear all about that, because as you did mention, from where you had initially started to where you actually went, and then you actually came back, and then you started making a difference, which is really amazing. I think I did mention, I think I did say this when we were on a call, which is I strongly believe that in this life we are all here for a reason, and that simply shows that simply goes to show that I wasn't actually lying when I actually said that, you know. Yeah, and also at the very same time, another question that I have is, after starting in urban planning, right, as you've mentioned, what motivated you to take on the leadership roles in the public and also private sector? You know, and also what were some key challenges uh, that you actually faced in in these transitions?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the leadership, I think, came out of my own experiences of trying to lead, right? So I got myself in these roles, in these positions, and as they say, the higher you go, the colder it becomes, So the isolation does happen, but also in terms of being able to manage teams. So my sense was, what kind of a leader am I, and how can I get the best out of my teams? Now, I can't stand here and tell you it's been rosy all the way, there were challenges, there were difficulties, and these difficulties I witnessed in the way that I was leading, in the way that I was managing my own teams, in the way that we were working towards, the goals or the strategies that we've set up in place. And what seemed to me to happen is that teams have got their own dynamics. Sometimes you can have a group of very technically competent people, but people who are collectively not very supportive, right? So I can work on my own agenda, but don't ask me to work with a team. Whereas there's some people who can work in a team and help in that collaborative effort. So I started seeing these trends within my teams, or seeing the traits within my teams, the way that people showed up. There were some people who are very driven. I don't know if you've done this profiles that they do, are you a yellow, blue, green, or red, kind of personality type, and having done a few of those personality types, within my teams, I started seeing ways in which those traits come through, and the people were not aware that they had such traits. Somebody could be very kind of factual, like very oriented to seeing things for what they are. Those are the blue kind of groupings. And the reds, are the bulls in a china shop. There's either my way or the highway kind of people, and the yellows, are forever rosy and happy. And, like their energies are around seeing other people. Right?
Okay.
So looking at those traits, made me think maybe understanding humans, can help us meet our goals much faster. Because if you don't understand the humans that you're working with, it doesn't matter how competent they are technically, you might not still be able to get the best out of them. And this is what, kind of made me think, based on trials and failures, over the years of trying to manage teams, that I decided that I would like to understand, um, organizational environment more clearly, and then B, build onto the leadership part as how do we prepare leaders to lead? Because I don't think that some people have it naturally, but I think it can also be trained. And that's what led me to do my executive MBA at UCT. And that worked a lot more around organizations, but I was quite thrilled by the fact that they spent quite a lot of time dealing on the human behavioral side. In other words, looking at who are you and how do you enter the world? How do you present yourself? How do you navigate your own self, in terms of your mental space, and how do you show up? And that, in some ways, helped me a lot in thinking around how one could use this, not only to help me in my leadership journey, but also to help others. And what better way than to focus and provide a platform to be able to do so. And that is what WS and Co is all about, is helping leaders to lead self in order to lead others, and to do so for impact.
Okay. Thank you very much for actually sharing that. And as I did mention, I think your journey is really, really, really uh the fact that also at the very same time, I'm just that person. You have to forgive me. So at the very same time, I think you've managed to not only take the information that you got, but the fact that you just keep on sharing it. That I just think it's something that is quite amazing. And as I did say, I'm just that person. So you have to forgive me. I'll keep on reminding you of that. You know, I'll keep on reminding you of that. And I think you've mentioned a bit about what actually inspired you to establish your company, which is WS and Co, right? Uh, but at the very same time, uh, how does your personal and professional journey influence the mission and vision of your company?
Yeah. So at a personal level, what I'm building on is this idea about self-mastery. And self-mastery really comes from going deeper, understanding yourself in terms of what are your values, and what's your true north, right? What do you gravitate towards? What comes naturally to you in some way, that could be where your strengths lie. So I have been doing that with myself to establish what are my core values. And these are really based on teachings from a range of those who have worked in the leadership sector, namely Dr. John DiMartini's process, that suggests that knowing self is one of the best things that you can do to yourself, because then you show up in your highest, and you can reach your highest potential because you are in flow in some way, because your strength areas almost propel you to the next, to the next level. But you need to know what those strengths are. Right. So if once you know what your strengths are, what your key values are, you would then be able to operate in that and navigate yourself through whatever challenges, whatever, opportunities that might come your way. So for me, that self-awareness of knowing where I stand in my truest form. And this is not what the society wants me to be. It's not what my parents, are telling me to be. Go study this. I mean, I was lucky that my parents never told me, go and study urban planning, or, go be a teacher, go be a nurse. They were quite open in the way that they let me go. And that gave me that space to explore where I was. And in fact, up to today, they all wonder, what led you to study this thing. But what I found was that it was aligned to the things that I was passionate about. So if I wanted to see communities that were healthy and thriving, if I wanted to see environments that were habitable, where humans could live, much without, the disruptions of conditions, water, electricity, all of that, how do we create environments where humans can thrive? So, and then the other value that I have is curiosity for learning. So knowledge is very important to me. So then I realized that, people would say, why do you keep on studying? I mean, when I did my MBA, I did so when my daughter was also in school and my son is also at university. So the three of us are now back at university and they're like, Mom, you know, we're going to be, taking classes in the same campus, kind of thing. So curiosity or desire for knowledge, I would say that I never like to be not in the know, right? So if you are curious about something, best find out more about it. And that's why my curiosity to learn. So learning for me is a lifelong journey. And that in the context of that, it seemed to me that what if we can support others who are already on their journeys, but maybe they don't know themselves as well, or they're on the path, but they're not sure, where they're going. So I'll tell you, in the working world, the issue is about stress, for example.
Yeah.
People get stressed, about either they're not making enough money or they're not meeting their organizational targets, they're not getting on with their colleagues or employees, so there's all those kinds of stresses that come through. And if you don't know how to handle your stress, if you don't know how to manage yourself, those stresses can throw people off. And I'm sure you may have, heard of stories of, people just not coping. Mental state of being is being challenged, like never before. And it's almost like not limited to age. Young people have got challenges just as much as older people have got challenges. So my quest is to see through WS&Co platform, how do we support those who are going through these journeys and are feeling these stresses? Now, my view is that these stresses are personal, right? They start from personal. I mean, the world happens to you, but you have to manage you. That's the only thing that's within your control. Everything else might not be in your control. So for me, the idea of knowing self and mastering self is the start of helping one to be able to navigate, these pressures that might come of us from an external context. And that's what we mean at WS&Co of, for example, having a personal development plan, or for example, having strategic conversations that help you refine and understand your strategy, maybe at an organizational level, but also in terms of your own sense of coping, that you build to be able to do what you do and to do it in the best of your ability.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing that. And I think it as you've mentioned, it's something that is really, really important because you mentioned that most people and especially entrepreneurs, uh, you know, managers, business leaders, they do get to that point. If even people that are students, kids, everyone gets to a point where they have stresses and it's not and now it's never at that point where you can say that I do not understand why this person is like that. There's a lot that is happening now, and it's so I think it's quite amazing what you guys are doing, and I will of course ask you to go deep into what you guys do because I think it's something that is really amazing, and my audience needs to know more about this. And yeah, so you did actually when we had a call before, you did emphasize about the importance of starting with the individual when working with managers, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and now a question that I have is, why is this focus so crucial to you? And also, how does it align with personal values and purpose, impacting the leadership effectiveness?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, a very good question. The reason why we do focus on starting with the individual is exactly for the point that I've raised earlier, that imagine leading others without leading self, right? It's like a blind person leading blind others, right? So starting with self is really to say, I need to know myself so well that when I go and try and coordinate and direct a group of others, I'm already grounded, in the way that I come through. And I also have a sense of what other people might bring to the party. So starting with self is really the self-mastery beginning. So one could look at all the various areas of your life, when you look at your that self-preparedness, vocationally. Do you know what you're doing? Are you technically competent to do the things that you say? So for example, like you saying, Semanya, this is who I am. I can do X, Y, and Z. So you're confident in what your offer is. So that is where one could start, for example. Secondly, you have to ask yourself, what is so if that's your vocation, this is what you do, you're competent and able to be able to do that. Mentally, how are you positioning yourself? Are you in control of your thoughts, or are your thoughts controlling you? So that's another area that one can go through to be able to get a sense of, where you are in terms of, are you a victim? Are you going through as a victor? How are you relating to others? How is your expectation, and what positives do you bring into those environments? If you're confronted with challenges, how would you handle those? Socially, how do you show up? In familial context, we are not islands. We all come from families. So if your work is removing you from family to the extent that you're almost dislocated, I don't think that's a sustainable way of being. So you have to be honest with yourself and say, this is me, what is my familial relations looking like? What's my social context looking like? What is my spiritual context looking like? And going through those areas of life, I think if we are honest and we face ourselves in the mirror, and knowing where we are in those areas, it becomes a lot more doable, when you go and you find others in your work context or otherwise, to be able to understand where they're coming from. And one of the things that we stress when we work with our leaders is to say the first task that you have is really to know who your team members are, because they may have showed up to you on basis of a CV and they tick the box for saying, I'm a good graphic designer, right? But that's all we know about Simanye. We don't know anything else about them. You might be sitting with somebody there who is so gifted in other ways that could actually help the organization. But because you're only looking at them as being a graphic designer, that's all you're trying to seek from them. So a leader who knows themselves and knows, provides that space to know their team, can be able to sift through the capabilities of their teams, through having those open conversations with them, creating safe environments where people can truly be themselves. And that way you can glean, what other competencies exist through your team. And your task as a leader is how to harness that capability to help you reach the goals that collectively you've set up as an organization. So that to me is why I say begin with self, and then understand your team. And if there's synergy within your team to help you get to the goal, then you've got a winning team. But if there's no synergy, you know that early enough, so that you can offload those who are not, needed to be on the bus, to get off the bus, so to say. Yeah.
Okay. I think it's a very interesting way of actually putting it, because at the very same time, I think you mentioned something which I think is important, right? Which is that, uh when starting with self, right? And of course, I won't actually say it the way that you said it, but I'll try to make sure I get it there. So basically, you mentioned something which was that, it's important for leaders, right? To 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 not to keep their team members at that point where they're like, you have to do this, you need to allow your team to be themselves, as much as it is it is it is an environment where they need to work and they need to generate the income, but at the very same time, you need to allow them to show you others other skills, right, in them, which can basically, because as you mentioned, maybe for someone, that person knows this person as a graphic designer, but you don't know if that person is actually good with marketing, if that person is good with, with speaking skills, and until you get to that point where you start opening up an open session, right, and giving them that space and giving them that freedom to, not, you do not have to give them that freedom of having to say you can do anything that you want. You can drink, you guys can party, but just give them that 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 opportunity to say that. Uh, bring. I can actually put it. I have it in my mind. I have it in my mind. you know. So I think that is something that is very important. And of course, I didn't put it the way that you did, but I tried. So
Yeah, yeah. No,
yeah.
I think you're getting to it in the way of expressing that it's beyond just the technical aspects of it, right?
Yeah.
And the way that we would like to see it is to say, look, these are humans, right, who are coming into this workplace. They've got their own motivation. They've got something that motivates them, that drives them, something that makes them wake up in the morning, and say, this is why I'm doing this. I mean, Simon Sinek's called it know your why. Why do you do what you do, kind of thing. So as a leader, you need to understand what's the why of the people in your organization, in your team, right? Because knowing that could help you assess quite early, is this person for my team or not? If they are for my team, then our values are aligned. If our values are not aligned, maybe we'll struggle. So somebody could be good, very good in the work that they do, but you may have different values. One of them might be, oh, I want to party all night and, do this and that and the other. And for me, a typical example that they normally use is say, okay, somebody is asked to deliver the goods and their goal is to actually go and deliver the good. And one of them gets there, a couple of accidents along the way, but they delivered the goods. So the question is, what drives one to be able to get to the goal uh, with the lowest risks possible, to be
Okay.
able to do so. And can you navigate your world, without being ethical, being non-ethical, or being this or being that or the other. And the values help define that. Some manager will just be looking and saying, oh, that's our target. We need to reach X million of, runs at the end of the month. And another person would be, yeah, we can do that, but we have to do it ethically, for example. And the others would be like, oh, forget ethics, we need to go for the numbers, you know. So if you've got somebody in your team like that, you have to ask yourself, what's really motivating this person? What's driving them? Why do they, want to get to that goal at all costs, right? And these are the things that can either be stressful within work environments or can be very uncomfortable and uneasy around those that one leads. And so it's important to understand your team members' values and get a sense of whether there is alignment. Otherwise, there's no point for that group being together. And the earlier you know that as a leader, the better.
Okay. And just to add a bit into that, uh, on my side, I actually recently hired about 4 people, right,
Mm-hmm.
into my team.
Mm-hmm.
Now, before I had tried hiring people before, right? And now one thing that I started to notice then was that these people, as much as I did hire, right, at the time, but some they like, for instance, there were some that would, as much as they're working for me and they're pretty much doing good, but then they have other things that they are doing on the side, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some, and they're not honest about that. And one thing about working with me, if you're not honest, then because it will get to that point where you will not honest with something serious, which will cost us a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I had to actually clean out the team, right? Everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to do it for myself for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And recently hired people, right? And one thing that I think this time around changed is back then, it was all about how can we get here, and
Mhm,
and now what I started to notice is that this time around, before I even got these guys to the team, uh,
mm,
I basically was asking them the whole interview. Basically, I tried focusing on them more than anything, right?
right.
And trying to find out what exactly are they trying to get out of this. Where do they
Mhm,
see themselves in the next 5 years in this organization, and
mm,
having to find out a bit about that. Now, I'm just at that point where the team that I have, I'm happy with how they're working, because I
mhm,
I I did my assessment. I now know that this is where they're trying to get to.
mm,
And instead of me trying to put them on this lane, I try to make sure I get them to that specific point where they need to get to, you know,
mm, mm,
and doing that also has helped me in terms of making sure that I get them. Let me just say, there's a company culture, right? Instead
mhm,
of
mhm.
back then, because there wasn't
Yeah,
any, it was all about just getting the money. So
right.
and by me saying this, I'm just trying to say that what you're saying, it's something that is really important, and I've
Mhm,
seen it for myself.
mhm,
So
mhm.
thank you very much for sharing that. I think it's something that is really amazing you know
Yeah. So that's really, I mean, and entrepreneurs in particular, could suffer from this a lot because let's face it, as entrepreneurs, you're starting, you're juggling, you're trying to find, how to deliver because your commitment is what you deliver, right? And so you need a team that is seeing the world the way that you're seeing it. If you have a team that, perhaps is not committed to the journey that you're embarking on, because remember, it's you, who's driving this. You've seen a goal, you've set up a goal, you've seen a problem you're trying to solve, you're trying to bring people in to help you solve that problem.
True.
Those people are coming to you not because they want to solve your problem, they're coming to you because they have a problem. And their problem is getting employment or, getting to their destination. And you are just a by the way, right? So, and you can't default anybody for having that. For heaven's sake, we're humans, right?
Yeah.
So the challenge for any leader is really to be able to sift through quite early, to ensure that the people that they're bringing to support the journey that they're on, the goal, the problem that they're trying to solve, are equally motivated and desiring to offer that solution. So if they're committed to offering that solution, then they will be the best people that you can have on the team, because then you don't have to push them, because they're already doing something that is within their interest, within their realm, within their capability, and they can share in seeing that vision that you have, because they, as you do, equally desire that future. What would happen when we solve this problem in the marketplace? What would happen when we build this? What would happen when we create this? And to the extent that they are, and they have the capability to help solve that problem, the stronger you are as a collective. And the one thing that leaders do is they say, well, when you come, live your life at the door. You just come and do X, Y, and Z. It's a very difficult ask.
True.
And that's really for managers who say, I don't want to know about your girlfriend, boyfriend, funerals, and and all of that. Leave those at the door. But if that person leaves all of that at the door, imagine, they're there trying to do their work through the day, but where is their mind? Their mind is actually thinking of those things that they've left at the door, you know?
True.
So what if, those things are not taboo, not to consume on business time, but if you had as a leader, had those conversations, what you could be doing is sensing in them what is going and trying to find ways how you collectively could support that without it being abused. Now, to get to those honest conversations is where one as a leader needs to be able to find mechanisms and spaces to do that without infringing on the business opportunities. And that's what we help do at WS and Co, is to support managers when they navigate those kinds of organizational issues, the culture issues, the task oriented, but also sensitivity of working with humans, and the idea of driving for success, because that's what we want as any entrepreneur, is success.
True.
So how do we support each other to get that success without losing oneself? you know.
Yeah.
Some people become so consumed, as entrepreneurs, you hear people who are hardly at home, their families never see them. Next thing you know, somebody has got a burnout. Next thing you know, somebody's in hospital, and there, right there is an example of somebody who's not managing self. Not to say diseases don't come, but we can help manage those much better when we are more conscious and gentle with self in order to be the best for others.
Okay. Thank you. Put it in a very right way. Actually, in a right way. Let me just say it like that. And now that you've actually mentioned that, I'm
Mm,
just now a bit curious about the processes, right, that you use to help managers discover and also align their values and purpose. I'm
mm,
just a bit curious on that side. So can you
mm.
share maybe a specific example where this alignment led to a significant transformation in a leader's approach? Yeah.
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, it's the way that we work is with individuals, and this is not a once-off thing. It's a process that we go through, and the when we say support is really having somebody on your side, to work through the journeys. Some people refer to it as business coaching, others refer to it as, kind of, some companies with help with strategy clarification. So one company came through and said this is the area that they'd like to focus on. What capabilities would they be looking to be able to do that? And our advice was to say, first be clear that you've got the capabilities to handle this. So for example, if you're working in customer relations management, you are really much on the sales, type of trajectory. So what tools or skills do you need to be able to enter into that space and to be able to market your services to help the others? And then going on, having done the personal development component of it. So before we even touch on the business area, we looked at the person themselves and why they're doing what they're doing. And that in a way helped them to be more not only confident, but comfortable in what they're seeking, the problem that they're seeking to answer, so that when they went, to establish and to open their doors, they already have a sense of this is why I'm doing this. And I'm doing this because, I, as a person, get quite excited, about getting this product to the marketplace. I believe in this product. I understand that it is needed and that it can help make a difference in somebody else's life. So then they went out, and I remember one calling in and saying, I've just done my interviews and I don't really get a sense of this person being as excited, as I would have wanted them to be. They look very good on the CV, only to find out that, yes, that person is good on the CV, but they are very, aggressive in their approach. And that
Okay.
might not be the way that you work, So you need to really psych that out beyond the CV to get a sense of if this person is the right person to be able to engage with. And so we move on in those lines, and you can see that it's a reiterative process. You always go back and forth and back and forth, and it's really having a mirror. It's like having a mirror that is there for you to be able to say, how am I managing today? How am I leading today? How am I leading myself today before I go and lead the others? You've known of managers where people look at them coming through the door and they say, seems like there was a bad weekend. Everybody runs through the corridors into their spaces, right? You've heard of
True.
stories like, so is that manager aware of the impact of how they are showing up is impacting on their staff? you know, because the energy that they bring is an energy of people cowering away as opposed to people reaching out to,
Yeah.
engage in the activities of the day. If that begins to happen to you as a manager, then, you need to really ask yourself some questions as to how are you leading? Are you leading like over heavy? Are you over, some people over delegate as other people are like in everybody's shoulders all the time? It's like, gosh, you hired me to do this job, but you can't even let me do it. So those are, you asked me for an example. I'm not going to mention names, but
Yeah.
that's an example where we stayed with that person with the organization to help. And up to now, it's a question of we've remained in a support basis that they can always reach out to somebody who's not in the environment to ask, how am I doing? How am I leading? These are the things that I'm being confronted with. And they found that to be quite helpful for them to have somebody who's not in the organization, but who can give them insights in terms of what they're seeing. So the relationship could be, from a month, 6 months, even a year, in terms of having a go-to place, just to be able to support you in the leadership journey.
Okay. And I think that is really amazing. That is really amazing because as you did mention, some managers or even leaders, they tend to not even know that that is what is actually going on, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that they tend to not. And I've heard those kinds of stories where you'd find that when immediately when people hear the car even coming in, people start running up and down, because that person is coming,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
even in schools we used to see those kinds of things where when the principal is coming, the teachers
Mm-hmm.
start being all over the place.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So those are things that we tend to see, and knowing that you guys, it's something that you strongly are focusing on. I think that is something that is really amazing. So how does? Oh, you were gonna say?
Yes, I was going to say that we need to be aware that you're not leading from a place of fear. One should be leading from a place of strength. And if you're a leader who's leading from a place of fear, it means internally there is something happening to you that makes you show up in that fearful way. And that is what you're translating to your teams. So the self-mastery helps you not lead from the place of fear. You're leading from a place of strength, and you approach the world with a way of possibility, and that those people are able to do that which you've committed to do. And that's what some of us miss as leaders, that we think that we can impose, but we're imposing from our own fearful state. The company is not going to meet the target. These people are just sleeping on the job, da, 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 da. So it's a very negative way of looking at the world. And it's not sustainable. Such organizations or such leaders tend to get burnout quite quickly, and the results are not pleasing.
Okay. Thank you very
Mhm,
much for sharing that. And I think let's say something that we only have 3 minutes. I'll just
mhm,
ask you about three or two questions, then we should be done.
mhm,
So basically now for entrepreneurs looking to build a purpose-driven organization, what
mhm,
advice would you give on starting with individual alignment and fostering a culture that supports shared vision and
mhm,
goals?
mhm, mhm. Again, I'll start with the individual needs to do assess their values, understand what their, for example, take the three most things that are important to you and ask yourself why they are important to you. Secondly, find a problem in the marketplace that you'd like to solve, which is most entrepreneurs do, whether is, creating the perfect shoe, or, starting the perfect restaurant, or a delivery logistics company, whatever it is, you've seen a problem, you want to solve it. But I would say that spend a lot of time in knowing yourself, because in building that person that you are to be in your truest form is going to serve you well in entering into that environment of offering services to the others, or trying to make an impact in an area in the marketplace that you think that you can do. And your sustainability or your longevity and success in that depends on how much you invest in yourself. So often people invest in, training and all of that, and that's useful. I have done that. I've invested in my training and my learning, but more so I'm finding that had I invested a lot in self, in knowing myself, in that self mastery, boy, I think that I could have done many things differently. And so what I'd like to encourage is for entrepreneurs, young people, students, business managers, all of that, spend time on self, and don't disregard the investment that you make in self, because that will put you in good stead in running your organization and in leading for impact. And your success actually could be limitless if you enter in that place through strength as opposed to fear.
Okay. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, as you continue working with individuals, and organizations. What
Mhm.
is your vision for the future, right, of leadership? And also at the very same time, how do you see the role of values and purpose evolving in the entrepreneurship landscape?
Mhm. I think purpose-driven organizations will do well. And in the purpose-driven ones, again, it's the idea of solving a problem in the world, and that problem is one that tries to remove difficulties or remove challenges, right? But you can only do that once you have assessed for you, why you want to solve that particular problem and who you would need to be able to do so. So, knowing self, knowing your purpose, and then knowing the impact that you want to make, I would believe would be three critical things that one would need to address. So, if you're looking at a business and saying, I really want to ensure that I support businesses that are starting out in order to get the highest numbers of customers that they could get, you are impacting, those small businesses by getting them to the marketplace, by ensuring that the right people, you are almost like a connector, connecting them to the people that they need to get to. What ends up happening? They end up, feeding their families, educating their children, creating communities that are thriving, and so that should be our bigger agenda as opposed to just, our bank balances in a way. And if we were to lead in that way, then I think collectively we could also create environments and communities where we thrive and where people are leading from a place of strength, a place of joy, as opposed to a place of fear and a place of because look, our society is riddled with negativity at the moment. And how do we elevate, the sense of humans thriving, communities thriving, leaders making positive impact and positive contribution? We can only do that if we know self. And if we are leading from a place of true north and honesty, it's more sustainable and much more desirable, I would say.
Okay. So all in all, it's all about knowing yourself. The moment you
Mhm.
start knowing yourself, everything is possible.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
And if you're leading without knowing self, I can promise you there will be a burnout and it's not sustainable.
Okay. Nelly, thank you very much for being on this podcast interview. Thank you very much for everything that you've shared. And I hope the listeners won't just listen to this, but they will implement everything that you've mentioned. If they need further assistance, where can everyone find you?
At the moment, you can find us on our website, www.wsandco.co.za. You can also watch for us on the Instagram pages, and also I think we're on Facebook as well. Yeah, so we'll be more than happy to support and reach out to us.